Chapter 2. The second dimension. The people factor. Briefly summarized, the first dimension of a conservative investment consists of outstanding managerial competence in the basic areas of production, marketing, research, and financial controls. This first dimension describes a business as it is today being essentially a matter of results. The second dimension deals with what produced these results and, more importantly, will continue to produce them in the future. The force that causes such things to happen, that creates one company in an industry that is an outstanding investment vehicle and another that is average, mediocre, or worse, is essentially people. Edward H. Heller, a pioneer venture capitalist whose comments during his business life greatly influenced some of the ideas expressed in this book, used the term vivid spirit to describe the type of individual to whom he was ready to give significant financial backing. He said that behind every unusually successful corporation was this kind of determined entrepreneurial personality with the drive, the original ideas, and the skill to make such a company a truly worthwhile investment. Within the area of very small companies that grew into considerably larger and quite prosperous ones, the field of his greatest interest and where he scored his most spectacular successes, Ed Heller was undoubtedly right. But as these smaller companies grow larger on the way to becoming suitable for conservative investment, Ed Heller's view might be tempered by that of another brilliant businessman who expressed serious doubts about the wisdom of investing in a company whose president was his close personal friend. This man's reason for lack of enthusiasm: "My friend is one of the most brilliant men I've ever known. He always has to be right. In a small company this may be fine, but as you grow your men have to be right sometimes too." Here is an indication of the heart of the second dimension of a truly conservative investment. A corporate chief executive dedicated to long-range growth who has surrounded himself with and delegated considerable authority to an extremely competent team in charge of the various divisions and functions of the company. These people must be engaged not in an endless internal struggle for power, but instead should be working together toward clearly outlined corporate goals. One of these goals, which is absolutely essential if an investment is to be a truly successful one, is that top management take the time to identify and train qualified and motivated juniors to succeed senior management whenever a replacement is necessary. In turn, at each level down through the chain of command, detailed attention should be paid to whether those at this level are doing the same thing for those one level below them. Does this mean that a company that qualifies for truly conservative investing should promote only from within and should never recruit from the outside except at the lowest levels or for those just starting their careers? A company growing at a very rapid rate may have such need for additional people that there just isn't time to train from within for all positions. Furthermore, even the best-run company will at times need an individual with a highly specialized skill so far removed from the general activities of the company that such a specialty simply cannot be found internally. Someone with expertise in a particular subdivision of the law, insurance, or a scientific discipline well removed from the company's main line of activity would be a case in point. In addition, occasional hiring from the outside has one advantage. It can bring a new viewpoint into corporate councils, an injection of fresh ideas to challenge the accepted way as the best way. In general, however, the company with real investment merit is the company that usually promotes from within. This is because all companies of the highest investment order, these do not necessarily have to be the biggest and best-known companies, have developed a set of policies and ways of doing things peculiar to their own needs. If these special ways are truly worthwhile, it is always difficult and frequently impossible to retrain those long accustomed to them to different ways of getting things done. The higher up in an organization the newcomer may be, the more costly the indoctrination can be. While I can quote no statistics to prove the point, it is my observation that in better-run companies a surprising number of executives brought in close to the top 10 to disappear after a few years. Of one thing the investor can be certain: a large companies need to bring in a new chief executive from the outside is a damning sign of something basically wrong with the existing management, no matter how good the surface signs may have been as indicated by the most recent earnings statement. It may well be that the new president will do a magnificent job and in time will build a genuine management team around him so that such a jolt to the existing organization will never again become necessary. Consequently, in time such a stock may become one worthy of a wise investor. But such rebuilding can be so long and risky a process that, if an investor finds this sort of thing happening in one of his holdings, he will do well to review all his investment activities to determine whether his past actions have really been proceeding from a sound base. A worthwhile clue is available to all investors as to whether a management is predominantly one man or a smoothly working team. This clue throws no light, however, on how good that team may be. The annual salaries of top management of all publicly owned companies are made public in the proxy statements. If the salary of the number one man is very much larger than that of the next two or three, a warning flag is flying. If the compensation scale goes down rather gradually, it isn't. For optimum results for the investor, it is not enough that management personnel work together as a team and be capable of filling vacancies above them. There should also be present the greatest possible number of those vivid spirits of Ed Hellers, people with the ingenuity and determination not to leave things just at their present, possibly quite satisfactory state, but to build significant further improvements upon them. Such people are not easy to find. Motorola Incorporated has for some time been conducting an activity that the financial community has paid little or no attention to that indicates it is possible to accomplish dramatically more in this area than is generally considered possible. In 1967, Motorola management recognized that the rapid rate of growth anticipated in the years ahead would inevitably require steady expansion in the upper layers of management. It was decided to meet the problem head-on. In that year, Motorola opened its Executive Institute at Oracle, Arizona. It was designed so that, in an atmosphere remote from the daily details of the company's offices and plants, two things would happen. Motorola personnel of apparent unusual promise would be trained in matters beyond the scope of their immediate activities in order to be able to take on more important jobs. Top management would be furnished significant further evidence as to the degree of promotability of these same people. At the time of the Executive Institute's founding, skeptics within the management questioned whether the effort would be worth the cost. This was largely because of their belief that fewer than 100 people would be found in the whole Motorola organization with sufficient talent to make it worthwhile from the company's standpoint to provide them with the special training. Events have proven these skeptics spectacularly wrong. The Institute handles 5 to 6 classes a year, with 14 in each class. By mid-1974, about 400 Motorola people had gone through the school, and a significant number, including some present vice presidents, were found to have capabilities vastly greater than anything contemplated at the time they were approved for admission. Furthermore, those involved in this work feel that, from the company's standpoint, results in the more recent classes are even more favorable than in the earlier ones. It now appears that, as total employment at Motorola continues to expand with the company's growth, enough promising Motorola people can be found to maintain this activity indefinitely. All of this shows, from the investor's standpoint, that if enough ingenuity is used, even the companies with well above average growth rates can also grow the needed unusual people from within so as to maintain competitive superiority, without running the high risk of friction and failure that so often occurs when a rapidly growing company must go to the outside for more than a very small part of its outstanding talent. Everyone has a personality, a combination of character traits that sets him or her apart from every other individual. Similarly, every corporation has its own ways of doing things, some formalized into well-articulated policies, others not, that are at least slightly different from those of other corporations. The more successful the corporation, the more likely it is to be unique in some of its policies. This is particularly true of companies that have been successful for a considerable period of time. In contrast to individuals whose fundamental character traits change but little once they reach maturity, the ways of companies are influenced not only by outside events but by the reactions to those events of a whole series of different personalities who, as time goes on, follow one another in the top posts within the organization. However much policies may differ among companies, there are 3 elements that must always be present if a company's shares are to be worthy of holding for conservative, long-range investment. 1. The company must recognize that the world in which it is operating is changing at an ever-increasing rate. All corporate thinking and planning must be attuned to challenge what is now being done, to challenge it not occasionally but again and again. Every accepted way of doing things must be examined and re-examined to be as sure as is permitted by human fallibility that this way is really the best way. Some risks must be accepted in substituting new methods to meet changing conditions. No matter how comfortable it may seem to do so, ways of doing things cannot be maintained just because they worked well in the past and are hallowed by tradition. The company that is rigid in its actions and is not constantly challenging itself has only one way to go, and that way is down. In contrast, certain managements of large companies that have deliberately endeavored to structure themselves so as to be able to change have been those producing some of the most striking rewards for their shareholders. An example of this is the Dow Chemical Company, with a record of achievements over the last 10 years that is frequently considered to surpass that of any other major chemical company in this country, if not in the entire world. Possibly Dow's most significant departure from past ways was to break its management into 5 separate managements on geographical lines: Dow USA, Dow Europe, Dow Canada, etc. It was believed that only in this way could local problems be handled quickly as best suited local conditions and without suffering from the bureaucratic inefficiencies that so often accompany bigness. The net effect of this, as told by the president of Dow Europe, the results that today challenge us are being made by our sister Dow companies throughout the world. They, not our direct competitors, are turning in the gains that push us to be first. From the investor's standpoint, perhaps the most important feature of this change was not that it was made, but that it was made when Dow still had a total sales volume much smaller than many other multinational companies that were operating successfully in the established way. In other words, change and improvement arose from innovative thinking to make a workable system better, not from a forced reaction to a crisis. This is but one of the many ways this pioneering company has broken with the past to attain its striking competitive record. Another was the unprecedented step for an industrial company of starting from scratch to make a success of a wholly owned bank in Switzerland so as to help finance the needs of its customers in the export market. Here again, the management did not hesitate to break with the past in ways that engendered some risk in the early stages, but that ended up by enhancing the intrinsic strength of the company. Many other examples could be cited from the record of this company. However, just one more will be mentioned merely to show the extreme variety of areas such actions may cover. Far earlier than most other companies, Dow not only recognized the need to spend sizable sums to avoid pollution, but concluded that, if major results were to be attained, something more was needed than just exhortations from top management. It was necessary to obtain the consistent cooperation of middle-level managers. It was decided that the surest way of doing this was to appeal to the profit motives of those most directly involved. They were encouraged to find profitable methods of converting the polluting materials to saleable products. The rest is now business history. With the full power of top management, plant management, and highly skilled chemical engineers behind these projects, Dow has achieved a series of firsts in eliminating pollution that has won them the praise of many environmental groups that are usually quite anti-business in their viewpoints. Possibly more important, they have avoided hostility in most, although not all, of the communities where their plants are located. They have done this at very little overall dollar cost and in some cases at an operating profit. 2. There must always be a conscious and continuous effort based on fact, not propaganda, to have employees at every level, from the most newly hired blue-collar or white-collar worker to the highest levels of management, feel that their company is a good place to work. This is a world that requires most of us to put in a substantial number of hours each week doing what is asked of us by others in order to receive a paycheck, even though we might prefer to spend those hours on our own amusement or recreation. Most people recognize the necessity for this. When a management can instill a belief, not just among a few top people but generally among the employees, that it is doing everything reasonably to be expected to create a good working environment and take care of its employees' interests, the rewards the company receives in greater productivity and lower costs can vastly outweigh the costs of such a policy. The first step in this policy is seeing, not just talking about it, but actually assuring that every employee is treated with reasonable dignity and consideration. A year or so ago, I read in the press that a union official claimed that one of the nation's largest companies was compelling its production line employees to eat lunch with grease-stained hands because there was not sufficient time, with the number of washroom facilities available, for most of them to be able to wash before lunch. The stock of this company was of no investment interest to me for quite different reasons. Therefore, I have no knowledge of whether the charge was based on fact or was made in the heat of an emotional battle over wage negotiations. However, if true, this condition alone would, in my opinion, make the shares of this company unsuitable for holding by careful investors. Besides treating employees with dignity and decency, the routes to obtaining genuine employee loyalty are many and varied. Pension and profit-sharing plans can play a significant part. So can good communication to and from all levels of employees. Concerning matters of general interest, letting everyone know not only exactly what is being done but why frequently eliminates friction that might otherwise occur. Actually, knowing what people in various levels of the company are thinking, particularly when that view is adverse, can be even more important. A feeling throughout the company that people can express their grievances to superiors without fear of reprisal can be beneficial, although this open-door policy is not always simple to maintain because of the time wasted by cranks and nuts. When grievances occur, decisions on what to do about them should be made quickly. It is the long smoldering grievance that usually proves the most costly. A striking example of the benefits that may be attained through creating a unity of purpose with employees is the People Effectiveness Program of Texas Instruments. The history of this program is an excellent example of how brilliant management perseveres with and perfects policies of this sort even when new outside influences force some redirection of these policies. From the early days of this company, top management held a deep conviction that everyone would gain if a system could be set up whereby all employees participated in managerial-type decisions to improve performance, but that, to sustain interest on the part of employees, all participants must genuinely benefit from the results of their contributions. In the 1950s, semiconductor production was largely a matter of hand assembly, offering many opportunities for employees to make brilliant individual suggestions for improving performance. Meetings, even formal classes, were held in which production workers were shown how they could as individuals or groups show the way to improving operations. At the same time, through both profit-sharing plans and awards and honors, those participating benefited both financially and by feeling they were part of the picture. Then mechanization of these former manual operations started to appear. As this trend grew, there was somewhat less opportunity for certain types of individual contributions, as in certain ways the machines controlled what would be done. A few foremen within the organization began feeling that there was no longer a place for lower-level contributions to management-type participation. Top management took quite the opposite viewpoint. People participation would play a greater role than ever before. Now, however, it would be a group or team effort with the workers as a group estimating what could be done and setting their own goals for performance. Because workers started feeling that they, 1, were genuinely participating in decisions, not just being told what to do, and 2, were being rewarded both financially and in honors and recognition, the results have been spectacular. In instance after instance, teams of workers have set for themselves goals quite considerably higher than anything management would have considered suggesting. At times when it appeared that targeted goals might not be met or when inter-team competition was producing rivalry, the workers proposed and voluntarily voted such unheard of things, for this day and age, as cutting down on coffee breaks or shortening lunch periods to get the work out. The pressure of peer groups on the tardy or lazy worker who threatens the goals the group has set for itself dwarfs any amount of discipline that might be exerted from above through conventional management methods. Nor are these results confined to U.S. workers with their lifelong background in political democracy. They appear to be equally effective and mutually beneficial to people regardless of the color of their skin and their origins from countries of quite different economic backgrounds. Though the Performance Goal Plan was first initiated in the United States, equally striking results have appeared not just in Texas Instruments plants in the so-called developed industrial nations such as France and Japan, but also in Singapore, with its native Asian employees, and in Curacao, where those on the payroll are overwhelmingly black. In all countries, the morale effects appear striking when worker teams not only report directly to top management levels but also know their reports will be heeded and their accomplishments recognized and acknowledged. What all this has meant to investors was spelled out when company president Mark Shepard, Jr. addressed stockholders at the 1974 annual meeting. He stated that a People Effectiveness Index had been established consisting of the net sales billed divided by the total payroll. Since semiconductors, the company's largest product line, are one of the very few products in today's inflationary world that consistently decline in unit price, and since wages have been rising at the company's plants at rates from 7% a year in the United States to 20% in Italy and Japan, it would be logical to expect, in spite of improvements in people effectiveness, this index to decline. Instead, it rose from about 2.25% in 1969 to 2.5% by the end of 1973. Furthermore, with definite plans for additional improvement and with further increases in profit-sharing funds tied into such improvement, it was announced that it was the company's goal to bring the index up to 3.1% by 1980. A goal that, if attained, would make the company a dramatically profitable place to work. Over the years, Texas Instruments has frequently publicized some rather ambitious long-range goals and to date has rather consistently accomplished them. From the investment standpoint, there are some extremely important similarities in the three examples of people-oriented programs that were chosen to illustrate aspects of the second dimension of a conservative investment. It is a relatively simple matter to mention and give a general description of Motorola's Institute for Selecting and Training Unusual Talent to handle the growing needs of the company. It is an equally simple affair to mention that Dow found a means to stimulate people to work together to master environmental problems and to make them profitable for the company. Or to state a few facts about the remarkable People Effectiveness Program at Texas Instruments. However, if another company decided to start programs like these from scratch, the problems that could arise might be infinitely more complicated than merely persuading a board of directors to approve the necessary appropriation. Programs of this kind are easy to formulate, but their implementation is a quite different matter. Mistakes can be very costly. It is not hard to imagine what might happen if a training school such as Motorola's selected the wrong people for promotion, with the result that the best junior talent quit the company in disgust. Similarly, suppose a company tried to follow, in general, a people effectiveness plan but either failed to create an atmosphere where workers genuinely felt themselves involved or failed to compensate their employees adequately, with the result that they became disillusioned. The misapplication of such a program could literally wreck a company. Meanwhile, companies that do perfect advantageous people-oriented policies and techniques usually find more and more ways to benefit from them. For these companies, such policies and techniques, these special ways of approaching problems and of solving them, are in a sense proprietary. For this reason, they are of great importance to long-range investors. 3. Management must be willing to submit itself to the disciplines required for sound growth. It has already been pointed out that in this rapidly changing world, companies cannot stand still. They must either get better or worse, improve or go downhill. The true investment objective of growth is not just to make gains but to avoid loss. There are very few companies whose managements will not make claims to being growth companies. However, a management that talks about being growth-oriented is not necessarily actually so oriented. Many companies seem to have an irresistible urge to show the greatest possible profits at the end of each accounting period, to bring every possible cent down to the bottom line. This a true growth-oriented company can never do. Its focus must be on earning sufficient current profits to finance the costs of expanding the business. When adjustment for earning the required additional financial strength has been made, the company worthy of far-sighted investment will give priority to curtailing maximum immediate profits. When there are genuine worthwhile opportunities for developing new products or processes, or for starting new product lines, or for any one of the 101 more mundane actions whereby a dollar spent today may mean many dollars earned in the future. Such actions can vary all the way from hiring and training new personnel that will be needed as the business grows to foregoing the greatest possible profit on a customer's order to build up his permanent loyalty by rushing something to him when he needs it badly. For the conservative investor, the test of all such actions is whether management is truly building up the long-range profits of the business rather than just seeming to. No matter how well known, the company with a policy that only gives lip service to these disciplines is not likely to prove a happy vehicle for investment funds. Neither is one that tries to follow these disciplines but falls down in executing them, as for example a company that makes large research expenditures but so mishandles its efforts as to gain little from them.